I lit the fire.
Wow. So he's so angry at this deceased person who he has a child with, who he started a life with. You're so mad at her, you light her body on fire.
And he wasn't done yet because he didn't have enough fuel. The fire goes out. So this is what he does next.
So at that point, I got a hammer, and, the body's like right there. So at that point, I just got really pissed off and started hitting the body with the hammer.
How many times?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you, but it was multiple times. But I know I was like hitting like in the face and like the neck area. And I remember like at first I hit her in the face with the hammer front, and then I used the claw and like hit her in the neck area. And I remember the claw got stuck in like her neck, and then that's when I was like ripping the hammer out. And then at that point, I thought I was done, but as I'm like trying to like walk away, I give it like one more whack somewhere in the body. I'm not sure where that landed.
That's brutal. Like to continue, and we've heard this from experts before, to continue just taking it out on someone's body, that just shows how much anger and rage that he had. And if this was an unintentional act, if she accidentally died because of a heat of an argument, why would you not then call the police? Why are you covering up? Why are you then dragging her out to some remote property, lighting her on fire, and then beating her lifeless body that you tried to burn with a hammer? Like, does he not think that any of these actions that he's doing is pointing to the fact that I wanted to kill my wife? That's all it was. I wanted to kill her, not that it just accidentally happened in the heat of the moment.
Some of the most bizarre testimony I'd ever heard. So we get into jury deliberations, and it gets added to the charge that the jury can consider the murder charge, or they can consider manslaughter, which is less than murder. It is a second-degree felony, so the range of punishment is significantly less. And the jury deliberated for 12 and a half hours. And it was after the judge threatened them with an Allen charge, like, because they came out at 11, we can't decide, I'm giving you an Allen charge, continue deliberating. Then they came back 90 minutes later, and they found him not guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter.
And so explain to people what an Allen charge is, who don't know.
So an Allen charge is the judge basically writes up this charge when the jury is kind of deadlocked or undecided, and they're asking, okay, what do we do next? He'll write this charge with, the defense and the prosecutor's agreement to make them pretty much continue deliberating. Keep trying. Keep seeing if you can make a decision. And if at still so much longer you're still on deadlock, then it would probably be dismissed. It would be a hung jury. So it just kind of requires them to keep working at it.
And so then the judge in this case did the sentencing.
Yeah. So beginning of trial, you could choose a jury to sentence you, or you could choose a judge to sentence you. And he chose the judge. And so Judge Frank Castro did the sentencing. This was on the Friday we got the verdict. On Monday we came in for sentencing. And this is what Judge Castro had to say to McDonald right before he sentenced him.
You burned her body, you beat it with a hammer, and desecrated her corpse. After that, it didn't seem. It almost seems like emotional, like a serial killer or something. It doesn't match up with your military career. And the last thing that kind of had me weighing is your emotional state throughout this trial. And it's not, I'm saying remorse is, you have to take your attorney's advice, but it's not remorse like I did it or I felt wrong. You just didn't show any compassion or emotion. It disturbed me that the only time you seemed to pay attention is when they showed her bones up there. You were looking like very interested in it again, and not in sadness of some sort. I thought if he showed that he had some sorrow to the family and whatnot, it was matter of fact describing, I'm hitting the bones like this. I'm hitting it like a movie. Just no emotion whatsoever.
Exactly how we all felt while we're watching this. And sometimes you don't think a judge paid attention, but he was, because he's, doing other things. He's, signing documents because there's other things going on in his court. But it was obvious Judge Castro was paying attention to him the entire time. Even mentioning that at one point he was on his phone because he was not on bond, so he was allowed to leave and have his phone and stuff like that. On his phone, not paying attention.
That's ridiculous. So he says this right before he sentences him, and then he sentences him to the max.
And the max for manslaughter was 20 years. But that's time served included. So at that point, it would have been about 7.5 years that he'd be eligible for parole. Victim impact statements were made by Andreen's sister and her father, which was really interesting when her father spoke, because he just was like, "You're like a son to me. You are my son." So he was like, "You know what? I forgive you. I love you. And we just need to get past this." Of course, they have a daughter, Elena, that is now being raised by Andreen's mom and sister. And she wrote a letter to her father that was read by the victim advocate. And this is what that letter said.
This letter was written by Elena to Andre McDonald. You killed my mother. You took away my life. And you broke my heart. And you hurt my feelings. And you will pay for what you did. And you will be punished forever.
Oh, that's awful. And it's interesting because she says to Andre McDonald, she doesn't say to my dad.
She doesn't refer to him as dad. So Elena, which we didn't say in the past, is autistic. So she had some learning disabilities. And this has really affected her. She was traumatized from what she possibly saw.
And probably heard.
And heard that night. She's putting things in perspective. Even though she's autistic, she's obviously aware of what happened.
No, and she's hurt by what happened because that's her mom. She understands who her mom is, and she understands who her dad is, and understands that her dad is the one who took her mom away from her. You can see that she's hurt and heartbroken by what happened.
Yeah, so that concluded the trial. But it didn't conclude Andre's time in court. He was still facing that tampering with evidence charge. So a week later, Andre he took a plea deal, and he was given an additional 5 years for the tampering with evidence charge, which is a third-degree felony, so that's the most you can get. It's 5 to 10 years, but they did the tampering. And Andreen's family's like, "We're not going through this again. We're done. We just want to move on." So they all agreed on that 5 years, which was added to the 20 years. So technically it's 25 years. He could have had it run concurrently, but Judge Castro's like, "No, it's going to be stacked." So once he's finished with one, he's got to do the other. So it'll
kind of feel like that's an extra little jab at him from the judge. And there's another plot twist in all this.
It just kept coming out of nowhere, Lee. We found out because we were live streaming. There was a lot of people in Jamaica that were watching the trial as it was going on that were interested in this case because this family is from Jamaica. They are known. In fact, so much that Andre's father is a well-known businessman in Jamaica. And Andre's father, Everton Beachy Stout McDonald, he is awaiting trial now for the murder of 2 of his wives in 2009 and 2020. These were murder for hire. He apparently is hiring people to get rid of his wives in Jamaica. And now he has been charged, and in September of this year is expected to go